Hi, Jesse Durham here. Let's talk today about the subject of legacy and how that pertains to becoming your own banker, as described in R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, the Infinite Banking Concept. Well, let's start with some of those things that were constantly and perpetually, repetitiously brought about in Nelson's work. He would talk firstly about thinking long range. Now that's going to tie into legacy very apparently. We're talking about how to pass on generational wealth, how to pass on legacy from one generation to the next. And that's not just going to be financially as far as dollars and assets and policies and things like that, but also the education. So thinking long range was something that was promulgated by R. Nelson Nash. Another thing was rethink your thinking. Now we need to think about that. We have to rethink our thinking. We have to acknowledge and recognize that throughout the course of our lives, different things have been input, and maybe they bring value, maybe they don't, but he challenged us to rethink our thinking. So we have to bear that in mind as we go through his book and his first book, of course, but also, and on this subject of legacy, we'll probably reference his second book, which was Building Your Warehouse of Wealth. And just in that title, of course, we could see how that would tie into legacy. So thinking long range, rethinking your thinking. Now let's talk about not being afraid to capitalize, not being afraid to build up, again, with the second book being Building Your Warehouse of Wealth, and the first being Becoming Your Own Banker. We're building up a system of not just policies, which is the rubber meets the road. That's what we're doing, sure, but also the education. We're educating ourselves. We're rethinking our thinking. We're making sure that we're thinking long range and all these different things, and not being afraid to capitalize. Well, I would also say don't be afraid to capitalize on your knowledge, on your growth, on your development personally, because that's what you're going to be able to pass on to the next generation, much as I consider with my own two sons and my daughter currently. So not being afraid to capitalize. We can't be afraid to capitalize. There's no point in time, either now or when we are older, at whatever point of life we were to spot check ourselves and ask, do we have too much capital? Do we have too much access to capital? No. So we can't be afraid to capitalize now. We got to be able to plant today so that we can reap harvest later also. Now, don't do business with banks. That's something that, if you've ever been in a situation, and I have, I've learned some things the hard way myself, but if you've ever been in a position where you've experienced the paperwork, the sense of judgment, perhaps being rejected on certain things. I mean, you're beholden to somebody else. You're laying yourself bare to somebody else. You're exposing yourself to somebody else who's either going to qualify you or disqualify you according to whatever hoops may be in place, whatever steps may be in place. And there are so many checks and different things. And it's a whole different story when you simply have to ask yourself, well, what do I want to do with the capital that I have amassed? What do I want to do with the cash value that I've built up in these policies that I own and control without assuming any additional risk and all these other different things? So don't do business with banks. Become your own banker. Build your own warehouse of wealth. Okay? And then ultimately we have to play honest banker with ourselves. We cannot steal the peas. Now, if you don't know what that means, go back and read the book Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. So think long range, rethink your thinking. Don't be afraid to capitalize your banking system. Don't do business with banks. And then ultimately be an honest banker.